originally from the United States. I've been living overseas for about 23 years. I moved to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, in the year 2000. And I've been here ever since. I've taught in international schools. I've been a trip leader. I've done some really cool things, riding a bamboo bicycle from Thailand to Bali, uh, paddling a kayak around the island of Phuket in Thailand. And as you mentioned, I've authored a children's book called The Box People, all about getting people outdoors. And you can see in the background, I'm actually at the Green School. I live here, and I'm in a bamboo house. So we have a pretty unique situation. Our house is bamboo, our toilets are compost, and our surroundings are permaculture garden. So you might hear some chickens later on.
Well, we are honored to have you, Kenny. It's a privilege for you to tune in all the way from Bali, but this is the power of the internet. I guess we can have you coming from anywhere in the world. So, Kenny, you want to talk to us a bit tonight about nature and how it plays a role in your school, in your life? I know that you're a strong advocate for nature in education. We've had many conversations in the past
Yes.
online. We say, Gavin, it would be a great idea if you had this in your curriculum. And I've taken heed of those comments, so appreciate it. And I also appreciate you being here. So, if you'd like to share your screen and show your presentation, that would be
Sure.
fantastic.
Perfect. Let's give that
Now,
a
just while you're
try.
doing that, Kenny, I just want to let everybody know that during Kenny's presentation and also through Charlotte's presentation, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And then at the end of this presentation, we'll have a Q&A and we'll put them to Charlotte and to Kenny, and hopefully they can answer your questions. Kenny, we can
Perfect.
see your screen.
So
Thank you.
you can see the screen. All right. So I just want to start by saying I think, a lot of us are interested in global citizenship, stewardship, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And for me personally, my philosophy is that has to happen outdoors and outside the classroom. So that's where I'm going to start and talk about why it's crucial we get kids outdoors playing and learning. And if at any time you can't see the change in the screen, let me know. But this slide is the benefits of outdoor play. So there is so much research nowadays on why kids need to be outdoors, everything from cognitive benefits, physical benefits. And if you look at this slide, increased resilience, self regulation, dealing with stress. And one of the big ones now post COVID is social emotional learning. So all of those benefits take place if we get outdoors in nature. And you can see this, the Natural Connections demonstration project. They have done some studies on why we need to get kids outdoors learning. So I always like to start with the why. Like, why should we do it? So aside from those benefits, like the social, emotional, the physical, the cognitive, there's also some academic benefits. Lessons are more enjoyable, improves our social skills, it gets more engaged, our health and well-being improves, behavior improves. And these are really big reasons I think learning outdoors and teaching and playing and exploring outdoors is crucial. And I put this slide in here just to show that you don't need specialized equipment. You can just see the teacher sitting on the ground. If they have a space outside the classroom, you can just teach any sort of lesson that you normally would teach in the classroom, but you take it outdoors. And I like this slide because it just shows you can take it outside. And probably one of the questions I get most asked most often is like, how do you do it? And especially teachers that are a little bit nervous or maybe they've never done it before. And I had some people talk to me about this. So I made this little infographic myself just to differentiate the specialty of outdoor education, which requires special skills, training, and equipment. And that generally is something that you would do with an expert or a third party provider, or say like a rafting guide or a hiking guide. That's something that would require special equipment or a special training. That's outdoor education. But what I really want teachers and parents and homeschoolers to feel like is that you can take your education outdoors. And I think this is a crucial difference. So outdoor education would require some, certifications, especially if you're leading high risk activities like rock climbing, kayaking, rafting. But anyone can do education outdoors. And I really firmly believe that any scout leader, any parent, any teacher, and that's just because anything you can do in a classroom, I think you can do it outside and possibly even better. So I wanted to differentiate those two. And outdoor education, I've done both. And I think it's important to know your skill areas. Like I'm pretty good at camping and hiking, kayaking, but I'm not a rock climber. I'm not going to set ropes and points and get people up climbing. So knowing your limits and being like, okay, that's when I need a specialty instructor, especially if there's some high risk. But on the other hand, education outdoors, that could be anything that you want to teach, from math, drama, literacy, science, music, art, history, or just having a good time, just playing. So I think that education outdoors piece is the crucial piece. And there's a lot of research now that shows just being outside has lots of benefits. So I think that's where I want to focus and really encourage people to try and get their kids outdoors as often as possible. And I like this graphic or this image just because it shows you don't always need a lot of special equipment, and sometimes actually it gets in the way. So this is just a bunch of stumps, tree stumps, and a blackboard or chalkboard, and you can actually make chalkboards and things yourself. So if you don't have a budget, or if you're living in a place that doesn't have, it's not conducive, then you can be really creative and create your own sort of outdoor space, either at a school ground, a nearby park, a parent's house, even, or even some schools that are in urban areas. I've seen it on the rooftop. I've seen schools put their classrooms on the top of the building. So I think these are all cool, really fun and innovative ways to do it. Now, this is inspired by a conversation I actually recently had with Charlotte's husband, and it's a small world. I didn't realize that we were connected. So a quick story there is when I reached out to Gavin about this, Charlotte tuned in, and then we got invited by Gavin to do this. And Charlotte sent me an email and said, "Hey, by the way, my husband's going to be in Bali, and you should meet him." So we met and we hang out and had some dinner and a really interesting conversation. And we were just talking about the traditional approach to education and how we could make it a more effective approach. And so I really like this, and I created this infographic after that conversation, which really inspired me. I've done both. And so I don't want anyone to feel guilty if you take the traditional approach. I have done that. And I think in a lot of cases, many teachers still do that. But what I think is we can have a bit more effective approach. So in the traditional approach, before I started doing outdoor education and before I got really into taking kids outdoors, we would research a river, we'd make posters, we'd learn about the global issues, we'd have a bake sale. And I'm never going to criticize anyone for doing that, because that is the traditional way and it has its merit, it has its place. But what I do think is we can have a more effective approach. And anytime we can have the experience first and discover something, an ecosystem, discover the flora and fauna, and make a deep connection, then I think we're actually more motivated to learn, care, and take action. So what I see nowadays as a more effective approach is basically flipping it, like going for an experience, discovering, connecting, get motivated, versus the traditional approach. And I'm well aware that some people are in environments or cities or locations where they can't go to a river and they can't go outside that often. And that would be a totally different workshop and topic that I'd be happy to talk about in the future. But I know that there's always nature nearby. There's always a national park. There's always a vacant lot. There's always someplace you can go. So I'm hoping to really inspire people, especially if they're in urban areas, inner cities, or places where they don't have access to nature. That's where the kids need it the most. And I'm really hoping to inspire parents, teachers, community leaders to get their kids outdoors and going for that more effective approach and going for a nature outdoor experience. This is my daughter. We're really lucky. We can do these things in Bali. We can go to the river, and we just went down to the river, had a lot of fun, and I just wanted to share that, like, that's what I think kids should be doing: playing in the mud, getting dirty, not being afraid of nature, and exploring. This was a group of students that I led in Thailand. I like to call this one log on, log off. And basically, it was during our free time. We were camping at the national park in Phuket. So if you've ever been to Surinat National Park, there used to be this log, and the kids always loved to climb it during their free time. And I really encouraged it. And I was like, yes, go explore, because I know they're learning so much just by doing that fun activity of climbing. They're testing their limits. They're learning their comfort zones. They're learning how to negotiate up and down a log. And that's lessons I simply can't teach in a classroom. Then what we hope is they get inspired to learn something like the web of life, or they'll go and discover things. And that personally for me is how it's worked. I grew up playing outdoors. I always played in the creeks and streams. I always wondered how a stream works. Like, what is in a creek? What is in a stream? Then, when I went to university, I actually ended up studying stream ecology, biology, and learning all about macroinvertebrates, fish, ecology of rivers and streams, water chemistry. And I know 100% it's because I grew up playing and hanging out near streams and creeks. And I really wanted to learn the secrets about nature. And I think that's the most effective way. And so this is a bit of my mantra that I wanted to share. Whenever I take kids outdoors, there's really three things that I like to say. It's be safe. That always has to be our priority. And we always want to make sure that parents, that schools, that administrators, that teachers know we're being safe. Then we have to have fun. If we're having fun and we're experiencing new things, then the learning will happen naturally. So you notice learning is not the number one priority. It's the safety, the fun, the experience. Then I think, and I know I've seen it in action, the learning comes if you meet those three criteria first. It's almost effortless. You don't even have to teach because kids will be curious. They'll ask questions, they'll investigate, they'll discover. So if you follow this mantra, I've been using it for decades. Be safe, have fun, have a new experience. You're definitely going to teach the kids something. And I just want to share a few examples towards the end of this presentation. It doesn't have to be fancy equipment. Here we are at Khao Sok National Park in Thailand. One of the students I was with, we just had some clipboards we made out of some wood that we found, like I think it was basically cardboard, a binder clip, and we were doing some sketching, some poetry, in a beautiful place, learning about all the karst geology, the lake, and having a great time. This is one of my very first outdoor classrooms in Kuala Lumpur. And these were my first grade students, grade 1. And we just went for rambles. We would go walking. You can see they had to carry their water bottle, their hat, and their magnifying glass. That was all they had to carry. And you can see there, there's so much learning you can see in this one photo. They're learning how to negotiate over a tree. You can see the one guy either helping or maybe holding back. I can't tell, but he's kind of pushing the other guy down. And then the people in the back trying to figure out how to climb over. So there's all kinds of cool stuff just happening just when you go for a walk. And I think my point there is a lot of times teachers feel like they have to meet certain learning outcomes. And what I will say is those outcomes come naturally. So if you just let kids play, you let them roam, if you go out for a ramble, for a walk, they will learn. There's no doubt about it. There's my daughter. You can see we did a little nature scavenger hunt. I've been trying to practice what I preach. And so there she is. We just went to a garden in the backyard. Wasn't too fancy, but we found all kinds of cool things. And so those three examples are just to plant the seed and let people know it doesn't have to be overly academic. It doesn't have to be based on outdoor learning skills like rafting or kayaking or climbing. It can just be simple things like writing a poem, sketching the landscape, doing a scavenger hunt, going for a short walk. And that's what I'm hoping parents and teachers will latch on to. And I think the last thing I want to say here is just I am not averse to technology. These are the things that I personally like to do. And I love macro photography with my phone. And if I don't know something, I tend to use Google Image, and I just reverse search, and I try to figure out what it is, because there's always something. I've been doing this for 20 or more years. I find stuff that I don't know all the time. And I say that because I know some teachers are like a little bit intimidated because they feel like they need to know everything. And what I want you to know is that you don't. You just have to be curious. And if you take a photo, you share it with your friends, you look on Google Image, there's Facebook pages now. You can post it and say, "What is this?" And then you can learn about it and basically try to learn about that for yourself, but then teach it to the kids. And so I think I've only got a couple more slides here just to talk about, playing in nature. Play is learning. And I think one of the things that schools and parents don't value enough is the learning that takes place when you're playing. And you can see it's you climb higher, you push your boundaries, you learn your comfort zones, you learn to think creatively, you learn to negotiate with your peers, you learn to appreciate beauty. And one of the big things I'm a huge fan of is boredom, because I know that when you're bored, you get more creative. And so I'll leave it at this last slide just for a couple of minutes, because what I will say is I'm posting a lot of lesson plans, activities, photos, and my Facebook is growing, my LinkedIn is growing, and I really want to share that. And everything that I put on there is free. You can use those lesson plans, those activities. And I've had lots of people come back to me and say, you know, I really use those lesson plans you put online, and that's always a good feeling. That's always nice to hear that they're being used and that they're spreading the word, and that is inspiring teachers and parents to get outdoors. So I think I'll stop sharing my screen now and then see what Gavin and Charlotte have to say.
Thank you so much, Kenny. That was extremely informative, and we've got quite a few questions in the chat, but we'll leave those for a little bit later on. I will say this, Kenny, I follow you online too. You do give away a lot of free advice, information, articles, resources. I love them. I steal them, don't tell anybody, but I definitely use them. They're amazing. So if you haven't followed Kenny Peavy, I would suggest that you definitely do that. But I have a question for you, Kenny, before we go on to Charlotte, and that is that I'm a Montessori teacher. Montessori said,
Right.
if you can't take the child to the world, then your obligation is to bring the world to them.
Yes.
And, if you are in an urban setting, if you're in a city, if you're in Manhattan, Manhattan's a bad example, you have a big park there. But if you're somewhere where nature is not to hand, are there simple ways in which you can bring the world to the child in the classroom in terms of nature? Are there any simple things that we can do tomorrow, for
Yes.
example?
Yes, for sure. And those are the two most common questions I get asked is like, how do I do it? Which is what I was talking about, how to do education outdoors and overcoming that fear of having to be an outdoor education expert. So that's probably one of the first. And the second one is always, I live in Beijing, I live in Manila, I live in Kuala Lumpur, I live in Singapore. How do I get my kids connected with nature in these urban areas? And, I will say it's not always easy, but if you want to do it, you can. And you know, that could be another talk or workshop. But the quick answer is you have to be excited about it yourself. You have to be spending your time, your weekends, your holidays going out into nature and then bringing it back to the classroom. And there's so many things you can do now. You can start a nature table at your classroom. So if you go on a holiday and you go hiking, bring back some cool things, some rocks, some pictures, some leaves, put it on your nature table. It becomes like a sensory table and the kids can look at it. I've started making lots of cool nature videos that I think are lots of fun. And the whole idea there is to inspire kids to actually watch, a quick nature video and then want to go find it. So that's another way. And probably one of the quickest and easiest ways is to start a garden in your classroom, on your windowsill, on your rooftop, wherever you can find a tiny space, and use like recycled plastic bottles, cut them up, put the soil inside, watch the things grow. Or what I've seen other people doing is raising beetle larvae, raising insects in their classroom. So trying to bring nature into the classroom. So that's something I think it's a struggle. It's not easy, but all of these areas will have, clubs that you can join or Facebook pages you can join and learn about the local flora and fauna, the birding groups or the insect groups. And then you have to love it yourself and want to spend your, weekends, holidays, go out, find it, and bring that enthusiasm back to the classroom.
Amazing. Thank you, Kenny. I think what you're saying essentially is model the behavior you wish to view in the children who are looking at you. Because if you're enthusiastic about nature, outdoors, animals, insects, sustainability, your children will automatically follow suit. Is that right?
That's right. You're 100% right. That's a simple, quick way to put it.
Yeah, thank you. Amazing. Now, Kenny, don't go anywhere. Stay around because we've got lots of questions coming in the chat for you, which we'll go to in just a second. I'm just going to unspotlight you, if you don't mind. And I'm just going to spotlight our next presenter, which is the amazing Charlotte Hankin at Spotlight. Here she comes, everybody. Now, before we go on, thank you so much, Kenny. That was brilliant, beautiful. Everyone's loving it in the chat. I can see that people are very enthusiastic. Next up, we have Charlotte Hankin. She is a PhD candidate. How far are you on with your PhD? Is it getting towards the end, or have you just started, Charlotte?
I'm in my first year, so I have 5 years to go.
Well, you are showing us the power of determination tonight. Yes, PhD is no easy feat, of course. Now, obviously, you're in Chiang Mai in Thailand. Thanks for tuning in with us today. We're extremely happy to have you here. You're an experienced educator. So you're a teacher. You've been working for a long time, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. I'm in my 22nd year of education. I can't quite believe it. I've held all sorts of roles in that time, all sorts of teaching roles, departmental lead, consultant, assistant head teacher, all sorts. And I really felt like I was getting a little bit separated from the pedagogy and from the relationships with students. And so I really made it my aim to get back into the classroom. And so I am, after 12 years out of the classroom, I'm in my 3rd year of being back in the classroom. And my passion really is for sustainability education. And I'm not an environmental scientist. So just to reassure people on the call, Kenny will know so much more than I will, exponentially more than I do, about the natural world, about different species and how to get kids outside in rugged, wild experiences. So that's not me. That's not the perspective with which I come from. So my presentation will be still in the realms of sustainability, but with a slightly different perspective. So
amazing. Now, before, you're probably more knowledgeable than you're probably being extremely humble, but before you do go to your presentation, let me ask you a little bit about your organization, Coconut Thinking. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. Coconut Thinking is something that I've co-founded with my husband, Benjamin Freud. And for some of you on the call now, you may be active on LinkedIn, and you will know that my husband has a podcast and he writes amazingly beautiful articles about the Bio Collective, about ecocentrism, and about relationships with others. And so Benjamin is the definitely front and center face of Coconut Thinking, but the content is very much a product of our conversations in the home. And so Coconut Thinking is really our way of trying to build networks with like-minded people across the world, people who also hold similar concerns to us about more traditional notions of education schools. I highly recommend the podcast. Benjamin asks very challenging questions to his guests. They're not educators, they're from different industries, as well as some from education. And he really brings the field of research that I work within is post-humanism. So Benjamin and I bring this post-humanist approach to everything, really. So we're concerned with nurturing and galvanizing people's approaches towards education and life that is not human-centric. And so these are some of the things that I will be talking about today.
Amazing. Okay, without further ado, Charlotte, if you don't mind giving us your presentation, if you want to share it, and I will spotlight it, that would be great.
Sure. Just give me a moment. So Gavin, you're going to have to be my my eyes. How does that look?
You just need to make it full screen and then we're good to go. If you press play, it will go full screen. You are good. Perfect. Full screen.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is my presentation. I'm going to take you through a few slides. The slides consist of a lot of my educational practice as a homeroom teacher. So I teach grades 3 and 4. I have a mixed age class, and those children are between 8 and 10 years old. So I really come at this from a junior or a primary school perspective, and I am doing the job day in, day out. So I fully understand some of those comments in the chat about the difficulties of getting outside, trying to balance the more sort of traditional approaches to education, and maybe trying to work with that tension of innovating, but also bringing us back to what we know is important for our planet and for each other. So everything I'm saying, I do myself. I just want to let you know there's some empathy there, just like Kenny. So I'm a teacher by day and I'm a researcher by night and by weekend. And my research is about anthropocentrism. And there might be some of you on the call who already know that, but for those of you who don't, anthro meaning man, human, and anthropocentrism is really the perspective that holds the human being as the most important species on the planet, the most important species in our ecosystem. The human being is able to take, use, test, wear, eat, whatever it likes from the resources of the natural world. And so it's this attitude and these anthropocentric behaviours that really have led to the damage and destruction in our planet. And sadly, some of that damage and destruction is beyond the point of no repair. We are facing such terrible natural disasters across the world, which is a result of climate change. We're noticing that there are many species that are now disappearing, they're becoming extinct. And we know that the way that we live our lives has to change, not only for our own species and our own survival, but for the survival of the planet. It is no less important than that. So I'm interested in where anthropocentrism lies within our schools and our education systems. And so I'm researching the kinds of language that we use, the textbooks that we use, maybe the stories that we read to the children in our classrooms, what kind of materials or resources we bring into our classrooms, the field trips that we take our students on, and so on. So I'm interested in the whole realms of education in schools and how anthropocentrism might be perpetuated by our educational systems. So what I'm researching and what I'm really passionate and interested in is moving from the ego to the eco. And as you can see from the diagram, it is a whole mindset or worldview change that we need in order for all life to thrive within our ecosystem. It shouldn't be about survival, it should be about thriving. And so there we can see the little green human is at one with all the other species. And then there we can see we've got a horse, a seal, a giraffe, we've got monkeys and lizards. All of these other species are just as important as the human. And that's because none of us live in isolation from the others. We're all interconnected, not connected, interconnected. And so I'm looking to advocate for an education system that places value and meaning and worth on the life of all living things. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a context for where I'm coming from with my thinking, with my research and with my practice. And I just want to share this quote from Bruno Latour, who is really well known in post-humanism. I'll just read this aloud. To limit the discussion to humans, their interests, their subjectivities and their rights will appear as strange a few years from now as having denied the right to vote to slaves, poor people or women. And I really strongly feel that this is how we have to think now as humans, as people. We're all connected on this call, but it's not just about us. We have to be thinking about other species. Human beings can't live without the bees, without the bumblebees. There's just one example. And scientists and experts out there are now telling us that we are now in the midst of the 6th extinction. The 5th extinction was the dinosaurs, about 65 million years ago. And the 6th mass extinction is the result of human activity in our planet. The previous 5 mass extinctions were down to natural phenomena. And very sadly, the 6th mass extinction is down to human beings and the way that we destroy and damage the natural world. Now, I'm coming at that with quite some heavy words, but I also want this to be a quite hopeful conversation, because we all have the power to make changes. And as Gavin shared at the beginning of this call tonight, everyone has a responsibility to everyone else, to everything else. And we can all, from wherever we are in the world, we can all do something to work together to help our planet to thrive. I'm going to share 3 strategies today that everyone, anywhere, wherever you are living, can try. Because I fortunately live in a place of outstanding natural beauty here in Thailand, and my school has a farm, an outdoor cookery school, beautiful paddy fields with water buffalo, bright red insects, beautiful birds. It's lush, it's exotic, it is full of abundance. But I know that for lots of you out there, you want to make a change, you want to be doing something, but maybe you live in urban areas and it's difficult to get outside. So this is one simple strategy that you can start using, start playing with tomorrow in your classroom. It's called decentering the human, taking the human out of all of your provocations and the way that you approach learning. That might seem a bit weird and a bit scary because we are a school and we are there for children who are little humans, but just bear with me. First thing, you may notice that my slides all have natural world images, and that's because I'm trying to decenter the human in the way that I'm communicating with you now. Here we've got ants, amazing little creatures that we can learn so much from, and you can see that my language is just on the right of the screen. So I'm actually making a space for the ants to take a bit of a center stage, and you'll know that when you move through my slides that I'm trying to decenter the human with my visuals. How do I do this? Okay, this was a science lesson about the human body. We were looking at digestion, which was very exciting for the students, circulation, the nervous system. We were looking at all the different systems in a human body. And we started this unit by looking at the body, looking at the anatomy of a scorpion. Now, this is one of our outdoor education specialists. He did not capture the scorpion for this encounter. The scorpion was found on the school site, and we know that that could provide a risk to the students, but we also felt it could provide a risk to the scorpion, because if people are scared, they might hurt it. And so this scorpion was just for a short period of time placed in this plastic container, and we very gently, very respectfully looked at this scorpion and talked about its anatomy. We talked about what's special about it. We talked about how it is similar or different to a human anatomy. And it was through that conversation that led us to springboard into the human body. Along the way, we talked about these 2 questions on the right-hand side. How might the scorpion feel in the container? So I'm constantly asking my students to empathise with other species. The empathy is really key to sustainability education. We cannot expect young people to have relationships with the natural world if they don't care, if they don't have exposure to the natural world. Now, you could have a photograph. You don't need a real life scorpion or any other animal. You could share photographs as a way to decenter the human experience. And my other question to the students there, how might we relocate the scorpion so that it's safe from humans? So instead of saying, how do we keep the humans safe from the scorpion, flip that around. How do we keep the scorpion safe from the humans? So what we're doing is we're creating a sense of care, always thinking about other species. How can we support them? How can we live in harmony and balance with them? There's one example. That was science. Okay, this was well-being. Now we went to the farm, and you can see my student there, Chinder. He had got one of the school iPads, and he photographed the goats. You don't need to do that. You could have photographs in your classroom. I started off talking about well-being with the students by looking at the well-being of the natural world. So you can see again that I've entered this learning experience not from a human perspective, but from a natural world perspective. We went off around our farm, we looked at all the different grasses, the trees, the different animals, the insects. How can we see that there's thriving in our natural world? Where is the evidence of well-being? So the students took photographs, and they then created these little not food webs, these little webs. And what I was really trying to support them with is to think about the interconnectedness of life. And so these goats, you can see, Chinder was able to say, well, they need shelter, they need food, they need support from the farmers. And he was able to start thinking more with a systems approach. From this experience, again, going in with a different species, then we use it as a springboard for thinking about the human. How does this experience with the natural world help us to understand our own well-being? From this, the students were able to create these huge webs where they thought about their own well-being and all the different interconnected parts that are necessary for them to feel like they're thriving. All right, this was great. We're exploring the concept of conflict. I'm at an IB school, by the way, so this concept of conflict was part of my central idea. What I showed the children was a 1-minute YouTube clip. No outdoor learning, but I'm still experiencing other species with the students. And we watched it, it wasn't particularly vicious. We watched these 2 lions fighting. They were actually fighting over territory, and it was not too bloodthirsty at all. And my question to the students was, how do you identify with these lions? And I sat back and I thought, ooh, they're probably going to find this really difficult. I'm probably going to need to offer supplementary questions to help them understand conflict. But they didn't. They immediately went to, I experienced something like this when my sister comes into my bedroom and takes my clothes, or I experience conflict in the car when my brother is playing music that's too loud. And they got it. They could identify with these lions fighting, and they could give examples and justify from their own human experience. And so to me, this was really powerful because I've got the belief that children have a much closer relationship to the natural world than adults do. And I think they make seamless connections to natural world experiences and other species than adults do. And this is part of my thinking that maybe schooling and education actually turns us more anthropocentric, because I believe children have something very unique, innate within them that helps them to relate with other species. Moving on from conflict, I then showed them these 6 images. You can see that they involve the human, but they also involve other species. We've got wildflowers, we've got a cow, a restaurant where we might eat other species. There's our local market selling the beautiful vegetables from the hills, and then a football match. I asked my students, where can you see conflict in these images? And again, I was so amazed because I thought I would need to give lots of supplementary questions to help them to work with these ideas. But one boy chose the flowers. Immediately, he said the native species of flower might be in conflict with new species that have been planted nearby. And I asked him, what do you mean by that? And he said it might be in conflict for the soil, for the nutrients, and for the space. And again, I was just blown away. And this is, again, another conversation involving sustainability education inside the classroom. I just had some images and we had a discussion about it. So those are some real examples from my practice about how I enter learning experiences that are not always from a human perspective. Go into your learning experiences with different species, not just the human, trying to reduce that anthropocentrism. Okay, this is my second example. Deprivilege the visual. We've got so many different senses, and yet we tend to lead with our visual sense more than the others. I think 70% of our communication is visual. If we want students to be able to attend to relationships with the natural world, we have to also support their other senses. And so what I've really been experimenting with this year is sound. And so here we are. We're not collecting sounds because that's very anthropocentric. We're creating pieces of music with the more than human world. And so you can see bottom right, we were doing a little sit spot. That's just to sit outside our classroom, listen to the different sounds of nature. We practiced listening. You can see top right, the boys are covering their faces. They're practicing how to listen, to activate their ears, to take away their eyesight. We're then using iPads to create with water, splashes of water, squelches of mud. And then back in the classroom, we're using GarageBand with natural world sounds so that we can then talk about how those sounds make us feel, how we relate to them, and be able to justify and explain reasons for that. So this was a really creative unit of inquiry, and really helping the students to slow down and be really observant to the world around them. That's a really important part of sustainability education as well. My third strategy is to include other species perspectives. Again, we're trying to remove that anthropocentric gaze. And so how can we try and think with other species? Not because we're trying to pretend we understand them or know them. We're not trying to speak for them. We're just trying to develop that empathy and care for others. So this is very recent. This is just from a couple of weeks ago. I started off reading a book. So this is literacy. And top left, you can see day 7. And to cut a long story short, this guy, Todd, brought home a parrot. The parrot was expecting to go and live in a rainforest with banana trees, but the parrot was placed in a cage overlooking a freeway. And I didn't say anything to my students, but they said to me that that made them feel sad. They didn't feel that the parrot should be in a cage. So we went off and we explored. Well, how do you think the parrot felt then? What kind of a lifestyle do you think the parrot should be leading? And so we researched, what do parrots eat? Where do parrots live? Why do people put parrots in cages? And so you can see then they made little books and they wrote memoirs from the perspective of an animal. And you can see we've got a cat, kitty, elephants, lots of elephants here in northern Thailand, and a snake. And what really amazed me about the students is that all of them felt that caging animals was wrong. And in most of their pieces of writing, the animal escaped and went to another habitat. And actually one boy was so moved by this whole experience that he went home and asked his mum to buy his hamster a new cage with wheels and slides and just much more space. And so there's a real life example of students really considering the relationships that they have with other species and what they might be able to do to improve the life experiences of those other species. I'm just wrapping up here then. Those were my 3 strategies that I am trying to work towards in my own practice. It's based on innovative, cutting-edge sustainability research. I'm using the learning from my research in 3 projects. You can see Coconut Thinking on the right. That's what Gavin has already mentioned. In the middle there, my husband, Benjamin, and I, and Luca Parry, who's in Australia, we've created a conceptual model for sustainability. So if anybody is interested in learning more about how you as an educator can make sure you are working with sustainability and regenerative practices, you might like to check out that website. And on the left here, this is our latest project. We are working with a team of people in the UK and Switzerland to place nature on all school boards. What would it take if we could place the voice of nature on our leadership boards, on our governing bodies, how might that make a difference to the decisions that are made in our school campuses every single day? So pretty exciting stuff. We're in a very creative time here at Coconut Thinking. And if you would like to connect with me, if any of those ideas sound like something you would like to try, if you'd like any help or advice or just connect, then there is my email. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. That's my LinkedIn profile if you would like to message me on there. And let's help each other out and spread the word. And that brings my presentation to a close. Gavin, back to you.
Wow, that was absolutely stunning. Thank you so much for all of that insight. So wise. I mean, you said at the beginning you didn't, you couldn't measure up to Kenny Peavy, but ultimately you equaled him with. That was absolutely brilliant. A lot of wisdom shared there. I've got a question for you, personal question, and that is, you focus a lot on perspective, and I talk about perspective a lot in terms of child development in our education system. Really, the problem we're facing educationally and as a societies all around the world is that we look at the news, we see what's happening around the world in terms of war, floods, famines, all of these things are happening. We turn off the TV and we think that this is a fictional story that's actually not true, or it's happened in past, in the future, it's in a book, this isn't true. But the reality is that everything that we see is actually playing out right before us. It's just not tangible. We can't touch it. So if we can't touch it, therefore maybe it's not happening. And that's a big problem I face. So I feel. And this value you talked about of perspective, I think is really, really important. What other core skills do you think, as well as perspective, and I'm sure there are many, people call them essential skills, soft skills, 21st century skills, as well as perspective and empathy, which you spoke about so deeply. What other skills do you think are really important for children who are growing up to enter the world?
The ability to listen rather than speaking. I think that's really important. Being able to take things slowly, to listen, to observe, to look for the tiny details around us, not necessarily thinking about big picture. So I think listening, the ability to listen is really important. I think the ability to care for others in whatever way that they need, helping them to meet their needs, nothing will replace a natural world experience. And that's why we wanted Kenny to go first, because Kenny's got all that practical advice from the Green School. So nothing will replace getting outdoors and touching, smelling, listening, feeling the natural world, because we're not separate to it, we're part of it. And so really it's understanding with a systems thinking mentality about how we are all connected to other species. So being able to listen and observe, seeing ourselves as interconnected, caring for others in a very real way, even if it's tiny details, that will then spread. And the other that I would think is question the power relations. And this is very challenging in many ways, but let's face it, children are often the best advocates for themselves, or the best debaters, or the best negotiators in our worlds. So I think that as educators, we have to really support them in questioning everything around them. Why is our school built like this? Why is our playground replacing the bushes, the trees, the other lives that live in that space? Why are we building it there? Why are we serving meat in the cafeteria? And I'm not being judgmental about meat eaters, but everyone can do a meatless Monday. We know that one of the biggest polluters in our world is the space that is taken up by agricultural farming and feeding our cows that we then go on and consume. So go into that cafeteria and question, why are we eating this? How far is it coming from? What's the carbon footprint? Question, why is it that our textbooks, maybe for middle school, senior school, why is it our textbooks only have images of animals when it's biology? because what that is that's serving a human need. We're only thinking about other species when we have a need to learn about their body parts. Why are not natural world experiences or different species on all of our school displays, in our mission statements, in our school grounds, in our textbooks? Question, 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 all of those power dynamics around us. And I'll just leave you with this one thought, actually. There's a great study that considers speciesism, this attitude of placing some species as more important or valuable than others. And so that connects to anthropocentrism, thinking that the human being is more important than any other species. There is a connection between speciesism and racism, homophobia, sexism. So all of these mindsets are connected to how we treat other species and how we treat our own species. They're not separated. So if we can really encourage our children to think with wholeness, seeing ourselves as interconnected with all the other living creatures on our planet, it actually helps us manage our relationships with our own kind. And that's not the reason why we should be engaging with sustainability issues. But if some people need extra persuasion, then there's another perspective.
Amazing. What an amazing perspective. That's so true, that if we can look at the world from everyone's perspective, then the world will be a lot more harmonious. There's no question about that. Kenny, over to you for a second. We have a question here for you that came in earlier on. And, I think about this when I think about you, because I was in Bali a while ago, as you know, and it was raining a lot. It was raining a lot. What do you do? Let me just give you a scenario that came in the questions earlier on in the chat. You're getting ready, you're heading out into the bush, you're heading down to the beach, and suddenly the grey clouds appear above and the heavens open and it's time for a downpour. Do you have alternative methods? Do you have other ways to be able to do outdoor education when the weather is, not in your favor?
Yes, sure. First off, is my camera and mic okay now? Because I had to leave momentarily.
You're good. We can see you.
Okay, perfect. Well, that happened today, actually, and we always have to have plan B or plan C or plan A and a half, because I had this activity planned and it was raining at 5 this morning, then it was raining at 6, then it stopped raining at 7, then it started raining at 8, and I had a backup plan. And the main thing is just to have a backup plan, but also if you have a big open covered area, it doesn't necessarily have to be outdoors immersed in nature, but can still be just a step away from nature. So we're lucky that we have that here, like a big gym area or just a big tarpaulin, if you're out in the bush. But yeah, somewhere that you could still do something outdoors, but you're not necessarily getting rained on. So that happens almost every day.
Well, it's good that you've got a backup plan. I mean, another question that came in earlier, Kenny, and I guess for Charlotte too, you're working in IB school. It's very tricky sometimes to diverge from what the curriculum documentation says. I'm a curriculum writer. I've worked in IB schools, Montessori. Every single one of them has their own doctrine. This is how we do it. This is what we touch. This is what we say. This is how we move. And it doesn't always include nature, unfortunately, because nature is this variable which is hard to get. It's outside. It's always moving and growing and changing, maybe poisonous, or the scorpion's going to bite you, or the snake's going to, attack. How do you find it in terms of having that cross-curricular feel? Is it difficult to incorporate nature into the curriculum, or do you find it's just something that's just in your bloodstream and flows through everything that you say and do, Charlotte?
It's a really great point, Gavin, and I've had this conversation quite a few times. It is the number one priority for our planet, for the thriving and survival of our planet. If you can't make space for that within your curriculum, within your approach, within your frameworks, then there lies a big problem. So that's my first very kind of radical point. Sustainability has to be woven through every part of the school. Recruitment, operations, school campus, teaching and learning, procurement. Sustainability has to be on every single strategic plan in every single school across the world. And if it's not, every educator on this call, please go back to your senior leadership team and put pressure on them to do that. Because for every teacher out there who's trying to do their bit, it really is the leadership within the school that has to make a place for this if we're going to go for bigger change. So it's not always easy, and sometimes things just don't lend themselves, and that's okay. But the majority of your learning experiences with your students should be about responding to climate change, biodiversity loss, ecosystem damage, and not necessarily in a more traditional environmental science way. I've just shared 3 quite easy strategies. I've had to do a lot of thinking about it to incorporate this into my practice. But they're actually, that once you actually start thinking like this is when we know that we're moving towards a way of thinking that is reducing anthropocentrism. So it doesn't need to be like a big, huge change and we all need to go on expensive training courses, but we can start doing our bit in our classrooms. But it should be in every single space in a school and on every single strategic action plan.
I completely agree with you, Charlotte. And I think actually, when you put your mind into that mindset of nature within education, you start thinking about that. And when you see yourself as part of nature, and your children do too, they say, actually, I'm part of nature. I'm it. Then you get a different perspective. And I'll give you a really interesting story that I witnessed, which was beautiful. One of my teachers was teaching insects and biomes and sustainability and the food web. And she was introducing snails. And, there were so many things she could have done. She could have read a story, could have been a YouTube video, could have been anything. But all she did was bring a snail onto the table, and the snail was from the garden and it was on the table on a bed of leaves, and she'd carefully brought it in. And when she revealed this snail to these kindergarten children, they looked with such amazement that, wow, my goodness, there's an actual snail on the table, and this is only a snail. And it was hiding in its shell, and she did a lesson talking about the snail and where the snail fits in and how it's evolved and how it operates and why does it leave a trail behind it, and how it has 17,000 teeth. I remember every word of this lesson. And what was amazing was she said, if we're careful, if we're quiet, and if we wait, eventually the snail will trust us and he'll pop his head out. And the children waited so patiently, so carefully for this tiniest little creature to pop his head out and start to stick his little antennae and having a look, if that's the right word. And they realized that it was a real being and that it had feelings, and it also became nervous when it was in an unfamiliar environment. And then they studied it without touching it, carefully looking at it and drawing it and making it a diagram. And at the end, it was carefully placed back into where it had come from. And from that moment on, this beautiful thing happened where children started to go, oh my goodness, all the insects have feelings. They're all like us. They all get nervous. They all get scared. We get scared too. And it's so easy when you put your mind in that mindset. Nature brings everything into your room. It's mathematics, it's culture, it's it's everything that we are, because actually we're it. Now I go to Kenny now. Kenny, you're at the Green School. Basically, you are walking nature. Yep. What is it like in your school? So I have a strong suspicion that basically everything is nature in your school. Have I got that wrong?
No, it's true. And it can be a distraction sometimes, especially if you have a goal to teach one thing, and then suddenly this has happened to me. A giant tokay lizard just drops out of the sky and lands on your desk. And so that's why you have to become a master of plan B, because suddenly if you're teaching a lesson about, botany, well, no one's going to listen to that. Your lesson has to change to a lesson about lizards. And that happens quite frequently because our walls are open and we have permaculture gardens next door. You really have to be ready to change gears at any moment. And I consider myself lucky that those things happen. I've had snakes come into my classroom. I've had gliding lizards come into my classroom. And, obviously you can step right outside and there's flowers and plants and gardens. And so for me personally, I don't see it as a distraction. But if you have a goal and you're trying to teach something and then suddenly you switch gears, you just have to be ready for that. You know, that I consider the teachable moment and just say, oh, we're lucky. This toke just fell out of the sky onto our desk. And so don't think that happens in too many schools. But yes, it happens a lot.
Yeah, and I guess we go to our resources cupboard, and your resources cupboard is basically the entire planet. You just go outside of the four walls, and bingo, everything's
Yes.
at hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we're really lucky. You know, I know some places like they have to really plan to plant a garden, but we literally can just step outside our classroom and throw some seeds on the ground and they'll grow. And so that's one of the pros. That's one of the benefits of being at the Green School.
Yeah, amazing, Kenny. Now, so look, I'm going to finish by just sharing something with all of the group, but I just want to, before I do that, just say to Charlotte Hankin and to Kenny Peavy, thank you for spending your time with us. It has been a beautiful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world. We are honored, privileged. This is recorded, and don't worry, Charlotte, I think it was just a couple of people who couldn't see your presentation. Most people could see it, just something wasn't clicked properly. Thank you for putting the time into making this magical. People are really thankful in the group, and that's great. What I would say to everybody in this group who's here today is that this is brought to you by Upschool Today, an organization I put together with my two co-founders and a huge team around the world who are trying to bring purposeful, meaningful education to as many children around the world for free. And if anyone is interested in joining, we have around 50,000 children coming every single week. We're in 172 countries in 1 year. And what is happening around the world is absolutely remarkable. There are many people in this meeting today, and I know them very well, and they're in schools where children have taken on an Upschool course, they've chosen an SDG, and those children have done exactly what Charlotte said. They've been empowered, and then they've activated their confidence, and they've made change happen. And it's from small things like having a No Meat Monday to feeding the homeless in Delhi because you see that these people need food and you have it. And it's our children who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And our success of our education today will be the future adults who are roaming in our cities in 30 or 40 years' time. And it's our responsibility to give them the keys to be able to lead this world into a better tomorrow. So I'm very grateful to all of you for being here. It's been amazing. Thank you so much, Kenny and Charlotte and everybody else who has come along today. If you want to follow anyone, you can follow Charlotte on LinkedIn, all of the platforms, and also Kenny Peavy and myself. And if you need anything, then feel free to contact me, myself, online. I always respond to every message. And I will finish off by saying that tomorrow I'm heading to Antarctica to teach live from the South Pole to bring the world of nature into every classroom in the world. So if you want to get involved, you can head to upschool.co where you'll find more about that course. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Be safe, everybody. Thank you so much. Good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.